All right, so going live a little earlier than I had planned. Hopefully the audio is coming through okay. I don't know how many people are going to show up for this because I doubt many people are looking out for me to be streaming these days. And this was sort of a last minute thing I came up with earlier today, but it's been a while, so I thought I would jump on and kind of, I don't know, talk and let folks know what's been going on with me. I mean, the Discord's still alive, and I've been doing stuff over on the Discord pretty frequently, posting things and sharing models and stuff. Yes, Mage's Musings. I am early. I decided to tap in a little earlier. No, it was actually, 10 p.m. your time, yes. It would be set 9 p.m. my time, but I got impatient, so I figured I'd show up early. But no, I'm alive still. Excuse me, although the coughing may betray that. No, I mean, I'm doing all right. Life has been lifing, and so there had been, long story short, mental health was preventing me from having a lot of energy and inspiration to do things, which was eroding at my ability to work on the channel. I already don't have a ton of confidence, I guess. Oh, geez, man. Holy crap. Sorry to hear that, Sean. No, so I already have a hard enough time feeling enthused, confident, legit when it comes to the video thing. I'm not one of those people who has a shtick or production values, and I'm also not somebody who has a lot, who puts a lot of stake in his own opinions when it comes to things. I also don't have a lot of strong opinions on things. I mean, if you've known me for a while, you know I'm pretty easygoing. So, mental health did not help with that, and was slowly but surely feeding into that, and eventually it really just became a non-thing. If you're wondering what was going on, I mean, beyond the normal stuff that's never going away, my ADHD, my anxiety, and more specifically in the last couple of years too, like figuring out that I'm on the autism spectrum and all of that. So fun stuff there. There's been since we moved here to Missouri, I've been increasingly feeling more and more isolated. It's been hard for me to get out into the community and meet other people in the community, and that had just kind of reached a head. So much so, and this was a long time existing thing from before. Hold on just a moment. Anyways, I have an alarm going. Anyways, so on top of everything else, pre-existing issues from well before we moved here came to a head. Long story short, I almost ended up divorced after 24 years. We are still together and doing better than ever. Took some adaptations, some adjustments, some realizations, and some acceptances of who I am and who we are. But no, we're doing fine. With that change, things have been starting to improve. I'm starting to meet some people, mostly through my wife meeting people, and then me meeting those people and me getting along with those people. So that's helped. I'm still not out making friends on my own and creating my own or inserting myself into the gaming community on my own, but baby steps. I'm feeling less alone here, which is always good. Hello, Mr. Dungeon Minister. So, good news with all of that development, though, is not only am I still running my online game, but I now have a game at my table that is in my, my gaming table in my basement is now being used for actual gaming twice a week sometimes, because I've got a regular Tuesday dinner with friends. We come over, they come over, I feed them, we play board games. And then every other week on Sundays, we play D&D in the basement. So that's good. That's good. That's been going on. I can tell my inspiration's coming back because I'm doing things that I normally just cannot find the energy to do. For example, painting miniatures. I've actually been painting miniatures, and it's the purple owlbear with a gun. It's from Alternative Armies. It's not going to come into focus, but anyways, I'm sure you can get the gist. What else has been going on? I'm in late stage kidney failure. That's a thing, health-wise. I am stage 4 kidney disease. I think stage 5 is the final one. I'm there. So that's been an adjustment. I'm still alive. I'm not going to die because of it. It just means I have to adjust my diet some. Give up a lot of the salt that I don't eat. Turns out, even though I don't add salt to things, and I don't even have a salt shaker, things like that, evidently a lot of the food I eat is heavy in salt. No dialysis yet, Dungeon Minister. None yet. That's the next stage. If I can stave it off, I can avoid that. So yeah. No, dialysis is the last stage. I'm not there yet. Hopefully I can stave it off. Well, and the thing is, beyond salt being in everything, my favorite cuisine is various forms of Asian food, which are incredibly salty. So there is that as well. I don't eat a ton of processed food. I mean, I do eat some. I'm a North American. But most of the meals we eat at home, I cook from fresh ingredients. But it's unavoidable. I still occasionally do, did eat out and stuff like that. Anyways, that I've got to go in for a biopsy to take a look and see if they can figure out what it is, what's causing it specifically. I mean, I've gone through all the early stuff. Had an ultrasound done. There was something on the ultrasound. They think it's nothing to worry about, probably just a cyst or something on one of my kidneys. The whole journey into kidney health started with my blood pressure, which they can't seem to get under control for anything. And so they thought that perhaps I had some sort of a blockage in my arteries that was causing back pressure into the system and therefore creating this blood pressure that couldn't go down. Well, that was what the ultrasound was to find out, is if I had any kind of blockage going into the kidneys. No blockage, so they're still trying to figure out what is causing that. The good thing is, I'm not so bad off as some other kidney patients. I only have to watch salt. I don't have to cut out potassium. I didn't come up as having an issue with potassium. And phosphates were a little high, so I'm not doing so bad. I think really honestly what was killing me salt-wise was all the Asian food. Because clearly my phosphates are low enough where it means I'm not eating a lot of processed food, because that's what's in all the processed food. So that was tricky. Let's see. This new D&D game I have going on, it is 5th edition again. What can you do? But it's with a bunch of new people. And when I say new, I mean people who have never played an RPG before. So I've got 3 new players, like brand new players in that group. 2 have never played an RPG ever. One of them has only played RPGs, but in a very limited capacity, and not ever D&D. He's not shy about saying it. Basically, he learned how to play role-playing games when he was in prison. So the capacity for playing role-playing games while you're in the Pokey is kind of limited because there's a lot of restrictions on the type of materials you can get while you're in the Pokey. So no, he's a good guy though. It's a good game, and so far we've done 2 sessions, and I do have another player that came in on that one last session. He's played RPGs before. That's pretty good. I don't know about that, Dungeon Minister. There's all sorts of stuff that can come up in prison that would keep you from being able to make your session. But yeah, so I mean, let's see. Still doing the same old job that I've always been doing, so nothing new there. Working a little bit more on game design, working on some of my war game rules and stuff that I've been working on. In doing so, I discovered a useful tool for aiding your game design. Not doing the game design for you, but aiding you in game design. I decided to actually run some of my from scratch rules, not the house rules or anything like that, but game systems that I'm developing. I ran a couple of them through ChatGPT and asked for feedback on it from ChatGPT. Because I don't have a lot of local gaming friends, and especially wargaming friends, I don't have anybody to work with on that. So I have nobody to really bounce the ideas off of that I can communicate with on a regular basis, a clear basis, like you could if you had like a local friend or something like that. And so I was surprised at the insight that ChatGPT was able to return on submitting these rules systems to it. It was able to point out shortcomings. It was able to point out vagaries in the rules, the wording. And interestingly enough, it was able to make suggestions. So while I'm still doing the writing and the actual game design, I now have a sort of a AI assistant when it comes to hammering out those systems, which is really cool. So that's been fun. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't do a lot these days. I work, and then I get off work and I cook. I was raised a poor orc child. Well, what? Well, what? Well, I mean, I've been explaining that. You'll probably have to backtrack through the video a bit to know. But yeah, I don't know if I'll be returning to regular streaming. I still don't have a lot of inspiration for things to talk about, and really, I feel like there's a lot of voices out there that probably do a much better job of it. They have something to say, and are better at saying it than I really have the means and the drive to do. But no, I mean, there's something to be said for just enjoying um, enjoying just being. I mean, I have to admit, you know, almost losing my marriage really put a lot in perspective. Um, the time I have during the week uh, is spent with my wife, except for when she's unavailable. You know, she's got a life. Part of the way to fix things was for her to go out and get some life separate from me. She was also suffering from the same amount of relative isolation that I was. She, however, is a much more social creature than myself, and so required very much more so being able to get out and interact. Now, with everything that's going on, my scheduling has changed a lot too. So, like for example, she's not. Well, I mean, she's back to work, so I still have Mondays and Tuesdays during the day, free to do stuff. But also Thursday evenings and Friday evenings, I am also free because while they are work nights for me, she's not around, and so I have those evenings free to myself. But yeah, so I mean, mental and physical health issues, some relationship issues. I mean, I would say I'm pretty damn lucky that it took 25 years to get to that point. I mean, her and I actually just celebrated our 25th anniversary. Top of August is when the official marriage happened. We have a weird situation. We have the legal marriage occurred in August, and the wedding occurred in April, the following April. So we sort of the one in April is the one that we kind of celebrate. The one in August is just sort of like, man, that's what it happened. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, I know it's such an exciting stream. Let's see. Watching movies. Caught the start of the new Alien TV series. I'm enjoying that so far. No, I mean, I very much hardly think I'll actually have a long stream tonight because I really don't. I don't have a ton to go on about. I'd be more than happy to answer questions or respond to any inquiries if you have anything that you want to throw up in the chat. I've been kicking around for a while trying to get games going through the Discord, but I don't seem to get a lot of play on the Discord these days. So I feel like without the channel going, I'm not getting as much people like paying attention to the Discord itself. So, Surian, Grumpy Slan, Whips, hello, all of yous. But yeah, so I mean, I've got some time to run games. I almost got back into my brother's game. He's had a long-standing campaign that I've been invited to and I've been welcome at for a good long time. It just doesn't mesh well with my schedule, and because they're so far into the campaign, when I went back to try and get back into it, and I sat into the session, I realized that I sat there that whole session just absolutely unable to do anything. Not because they were preventing me from doing anything. Hey, Doom Driver. It is a reunion at my place. Not because they were preventing me from doing anything. I was just really kind of, it was serious analysis paralysis. They've got this campaign that's been going on so long. It's got all these threads. This very well woven tapestry of events and occurrences and encounters and NPCs. I was just lost. I came in originally early in the campaign, but it was just, I was too new to the area. It was too much stress trying to rush over there after work to try and, get off work and then run over there because I don't get off work until 7:30 local time. But then I tried to go back. But yeah, by then I was just so lost. I told my brother, I told the group, I'm like, hey guys, I really enjoy hanging out, but I also don't want to be a distraction if I'm not playing. Please let me know when you guys start your next campaign so I can get into the ground floor and, make it go a bit. But no, definitely still want to run other games besides D&D. Seems like every time I get an opportunity to run a game, it's D&D. So I want to run non-D&D stuff. But yeah, anything anybody's been up to they want to talk about? For filler, I can tell you that the state of the hobby is in hobbying in general is kind of in a tough state, at least here in the U.S. The international trade market, let's just put it that way, seems to really be kicking the game industry in the teeth. In the miniature space, we have lost a bunch of small companies already, which really sucks. So once a miniature company goes under, a lot of times those miniatures are never heard from again. Fortunately, the way that physical miniatures are made, it is possible for the production to transfer hands, but somebody has to be willing to pay for the molds and all of that and have to have the facilities to do so. All right, let me take a look here. Claricon ramping up. I really wish I could make it to Claricon. But beyond the transportation issues, I mean, I've got, I can cross the border. That's not a problem. I'd have to get there and I'd have to, figure out lodging. And up until recently, that's been tricky because my wife has been having a hell of a time finding consistent work since we moved here. When we moved here, we both had decent jobs with the company. But shortly after moving here, she lost her job because of a protracted, never going to go away medical issue. Funnily enough, that medical issue seems to have cleared up. I mean, it's always going to be there, but the major issues that she was having with it seem to have faded once that job disappeared. And we're pretty convinced that a small concession on the part of the company could have easily kept her working for them, but they would not accommodate. And she has a chronic nerve condition in her face. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but trigeminal neuralgia, basically the nerve that goes along here, will flare up for no reason, causing intense pain. It's aggravated by pressure, which if you've ever worked call center stuff, headphones, headsets. Anyways, so she's been struggling trying to find work. That's made it hard financially around here for me to be able to commit to anything, any big expenses, which going to Claricon would count as. One of these days, if it continues going, one of these days. But also getting there is the other thing too. Like, I know there's other people who come from the area that might, head that way, but I have to also, consider PTO and all that. Doom Driver, running TMNT, cool. The Palladium one, or are you using something homebrew? Caves Kickstarter, Archon Studios, cool. Yeah, COVID and faceplant down the stairs will certainly do that for you, Sean. Let's see. All right. So what other old RPG systems do I have or favor? A lot of them. Unfortunately, not as many as I used to, though. When I moved out from my roommates in my late 20s, a large portion of my game collection didn't make it out of the house with me. That sucks. So now, what systems I do have or have in favor are different things. I have systems that I absolutely will never play. Don't even want to play them. But I have them because they were interesting. But mostly the things that are on my list to want to get to play is the classic 1984 Marvel Superheroes face rip game, possibly using Heroic, Bear's Heroic system, which is really, if you file all of his fancy work off of it, it's effectively the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game with house rules applied. Also, I very much want to run Call of Cthulhu 7th edition some more. It's one of my favorite games to run. Honestly, I think I enjoy running it more than I do D&D. D&D is just an easy one to get people to play, and I did not start playing Call of Cthulhu until, only a few years ago, because I always bought into the bullshit opinions people had of the game, where if you would ever ask anybody about it, they would always tell you, "Oh, everybody dies, everybody goes insane," which is, ooh, sign me up. It's just like a giant meme before memes were a thing. So in addition, I have other more modern games that I want to try and run. Like I have the Alien RPG. I love that. I am also a huge fan of Cyberpunk 2020, not Cyberpunk Red. So I have a bunch of Cyberpunk 2020 stuff. I have other superhero systems, but I'm less likely to play those. I've got Champions. I've got Heroes Unlimited. I have the TMNT RPG. I have my original books plus some that I've recovered. I also did buy into the redo Kickstarter they did. So let's see. Other RPGs. There's always something I'd like to run. Let's see. Card tournament 10K. It's always crazy that how much you can win playing nerd games. Let's see. Dungeon Minister, I'm sure there's got to be some facility in your area where you could at least do a common lodging. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of gamers who would not mind just a place to throw down a bedroll. Although, what's the camping situation in here? Like, that could be an option. Camp and then roll in. Then that way you're like LARPing D&D between sessions. Camping on the outskirts of town, coming into the village. Let's see. Heroes Unlimited is fun. If you want a grounded superhero game. There you go, Dungeon Ministry. You can run it sort of like an SCA event. You could have people could roll in, pitch their tents, and then just kind of festival seating. I had this thought. Speaking of the Alien RPG today, I had this thought. I want to run an RPG. I want to run an Alien game. I want to run an Aliens game where I have a science officer who is named after a chess piece. Because we've had Bishop, and then we had what's the first one? He's not named after a chess piece, but a suspicious name. And to where everybody, all the players are sure that's going to be, the traitor synthetic. And then I want to have the ship's cat be the actually be the plant for the corporation and be a synthetic. And the cat is going to, and I don't even mean this as for shits and giggles and like just as like an ironic thumb your nose thing. I want this to be like a legitimate played straight plot point where they're convinced that the science officer is the synthetic because he always is, but it's actually the cat. And the cat is there with its it looks like a normal cat, but it is actually got a synthetic brain, and it is there towing the company line and sabotaging the efforts of the space truckers. I think that would be fun. Let's see. Mechanoids, yeah. Mechanoids was cool. I mean, I remember having the original Mechanoids books back in the day. Those are some of the stuff that I lost. They did do a nice redo to tie it in with Rifts, though. Yeah, well, I mean, cats are their own thing anyways, so... And that's the thing. A cat, you could play a cat very straight and have it still interfere with the players, and it would likely take a while before they realized that it was more than a cat. Like, if the players are trying to do something sneaky and the cat jumps out and scares the shit out of them and spoils their stealth, it's just a cat scare. If the cat, gets itself somewhere where it shouldn't be and the players decide that they're going to go back for the cat, and that facilitates evil, well, it's just a cat. Dumb cat, stupid cat, right? So you could probably play that for a good while before the players figure out that cat is more than a cat. It probably would take the cat actually pulling out a taser and zapping one of them at an inopportune moment that before you can have the cat have like taser shock in its teeth or something like that. But no, I mean, I think it'd be funny. But there's one game I always come back to it. It's a favorite of mine from back in the day. Could be a fair amount of nostalgia. This game I would love to run for a short campaign, and that's Justifiers. And I mentioned it before. Justifiers is basically you get chucked to an unknown, strange planet, and you're stuck there trying to justify the planet for the corporations until you can get back. And so, yeah, there you go. But it's really cool because you're character types can be anthropomorphic animals, you or genetically altered humans or regular humans, which are all basically property of the corporation. And it's tricky playing it because, especially in an extended campaign, because one of the stats for your character is buyback, which is the dollar amount that the company has invested in your character. And until that buyback is paid off, you are still basically property of the corporation. And when you're on your missions, you're given a certain amount of equipment. There's a limit to how much equipment they can give you because there's a limit to how big of an object can move through the interstellar gates they're using. They got these orbital gates, and they have to throw a shuttle through it. And they basically, the shuttle's dimensions are the maximum diameter area that in cross section that they can build the gate, and the length of the shuttle is just shy of the maximum time they can keep the gates open, because they can only keep the gate open for a short period of time before it destabilizes, and so they can only really so the shuttles are very limited. It's a 2-story shuttle, and everything you have on the mission is on your shuttle. So when you land on the planet, you have a return gate. You can get that set up, but it doesn't activate until something like 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember what it is after your mission starts. And so, you basically, once you're on this planet, you have to explore it, interact with it, figure out what its resources are, figure out what dangers it has. But you also have to do so in a way that is not stupid, because everything, if you go around like wasting corporate material, you get charged for it, and it gets tacked onto your buyback. So it's always an interesting game to play that way. Yeah, so there's that. Speaking of games that I'd like to run, let's see. I want to play more miniatures games. I got lots of miniatures, and I like playing miniatures games as well. But those are even harder to play when you don't have a community, because they're not so easy to play virtually. They can bill me, and they will. I had one character in that I made for Justifiers at one point. He started out owing the corporation 2.5 million credits. So yeah, because when you figure out your buyback, it's a calculation based on your character's ability scores and a couple other factors. Can't remember exactly what it is. I think some of the natural abilities, stuff that your animal type might have or whatever. Basically, the better your character is stat-wise, the more value he has to the corporation, and so your buyback is higher. But, let's see. I did, for a brief time, get really into the old micro games like SPI, TSR, Dwarf Star, Metagaming, Task Force, those ones, the polybags. Picked up a few of those, actually got to play a few of those. Got the bright idea to try and write some, so that's been fun. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I went back to visit my kids last Christmas. That was cool. Spent 2 weeks there in Seattle again. Planning on doing that again this year, hopefully. I was supposed to go to a convention locally in June. I went to this convention last June and had a great time. And as per normal, when I visit a convention, the year after I get to go to the convention, it shuts down. So maybe I shouldn't go to Claricon. But yeah, so I went there last year. This year, it didn't shut down, but but they had some issues with their financing. I think what it was is basically the venue upped the charges that it wanted to cost. It wanted to, because they were using like a hotel venue. I think they had problems with them, so they didn't have it this year. Which sucked because I had the time off and I had the money, so that didn't happen. Well, I mean, part of the problem right now is that, especially on the local convention scene, your attendees, your body of attendees is smaller. And so you cannot recover from diminishing attendance as much as, say, like a Gen Con or a Gary Con or something like, or a Adepticon can. Because those are always going to draw a huge crowd. But yeah, small cons are the way to go. I mean, honestly, everybody's like, oh, man, you live in Missouri now. It's like super easy to just drive. You could drive to Gen Con if I wanted to go. And then they're like, well, you have to go. You're a gamer. You have to go at least once. I'm like, I have no interest in going to a convention that is 70,000 people and spans the entirety of a fucking city. I have anxiety enough as it is, and I can't imagine trying to. I was watching a thing the other day. Somebody was talking about their game plan for covering the dealer's room at Gen Con. That dealer's room has 1,000+ tables in it. It takes 2 days for this person, who's a veteran attendee, to cover the dealer's room. 2 days. You know, I also don't like with big. No, it's not in Milwaukee anymore. It's in Indianapolis, I believe. The other thing is I don't like about the big conventions, and this actually turned me off from things like Comic-Con and everything too, is I don't like the prospect of committing money and resources to an event and then being asked out of things because I couldn't get a ticket or the line was huge. The ticketed events really turn me off. I've been to a lot of local conventions, or even smaller regional, like larger regional conventions, and it's never been. I've never been to one where I've had to worry about timing to get into a panel or being stuck, not being able to find a game because I couldn't get a ticket to a game or something like that. I have a hard enough time. I'm not a very spontaneous person, and adapting to things last minute is very difficult for me. Combination of ADHD and autism, I guess, whatever, and anxiety. But the idea of just constantly just being on edge as to whether or not I'm going to get into the things that I want to do, and then potentially having to like drop everything and rush to get to something, total turn off. And I just do not. I mean, I'd like to go to Adepticon because it's a miniatures convention, and that's so much cool physical media. But I mean, even still, Adepticon was 10K people this year. I mean, it's not 75,000 like Gen Con was, but yeah. Anyways, 25K people, yeah, still huge. I mean, granted, when those numbers are for the whole weekend, but yeah. But no, so Fear the Con is the local one that I went to. It was good last year. Hopefully it'll come back next year. I'm within driving distance of all the major conventions now that I'm in the Midwest, so that's nice. And of course, I can even get to the East Coast conventions easier because this side of the country, it's all small state territory. Hey, Cody. Speaking of conventions, Cody and I since we became friends have even chatted about me coming over for like NashCon or something sometime. But let's see. Oh, Mages and Musings, boo. Boo. Oh, yeah, 70 is I the smaller local conventions I would definitely like to go to. I mean, and the problems here too is in especially living in the St. Louis area is for whatever reason it's still got that we don't do shit on Sundays kind of a thing. And so many of the events that come, this is one of the things that's contributed to my kind of general feeling of isolation and disconnection from where I live is because I work Saturdays. And so many things don't happen on Sunday here. I just keep missing out and missing out, which is aggravated by the fact that people I know, my wife included, will be able to go to these things. So it's very much not only is it the sensation of having missed out, it's the sensation of watching everybody else get to enjoy the stuff while I cannot. And so that's one of the other things that was just really grating on me. Is like, I seriously was reaching that point where I'm just like, why am I even bothering? It got really bad for a bit. I'm like, why I'm like, at this point, I should just go on autopilot and not give a crap about anything and just, finish out my days. That's where I was at for a while. I'm like, I am not the sort to end things soon, so don't worry about that, people. I am not talking about the about doing any sort of self-harm or anything, but it would be really easy for me to just shut down and just go on autopilot for the rest of my life. So, and that is something that I could easily do, and I know I could because I've done it before. Aliens Unlimited is one of my favorite books. I like that book. There's a lot of good stuff for the Heroes Unlimited game that are just good if you want information on running superhero campaigns. Lots of good tools. But yeah, so yeah, don't worry about me. I'm getting better, but man, it really I was really in a down spot for the longest time, and still am to a degree, but I'm coming out of it. Let's see. So I think I've talked about before where the name Elfbait comes from with my channel and the tag and everything. Goes back to when we used to see our ideas get picked up through the collective consciousness. Um, um, by the companies, and we used to have this running gag. There were tiny little elves hiding in our closets and under our bed that were taking our ideas to TSR and everything like that. And so eventually, we just started throwing our cool ideas out to the universe on purpose, and that was Elfbait. I was recently reminded of this because an idea for a small kind of indie miniatures game that I'd been kicking around and sort of tinkering with just got announced by one of the more successful YouTuber guys who's got a he's got a good channel, but he's actually doing the exact game that I was planning on doing. So I'm like, well, I got Elfed again. Let's see. Have a good night, Dungeon Minister. Thank you for coming by. That is so, Robert Phillips. That's almost every superhero game. And I think the So first of all, I mean, the problem with that in games is that games are not stories. They're not written, they're not edited. And so underpowered characters can often very much end up unable to play effectively in the game. You know, in a comic book, underpowered characters always still seem to manage to find a way. And it's because they can be written to do so. And a good player and a good GM can make it work, but ultimately, because tabletop games rely on statistics and mechanics, you can get left behind pretty easily. But yeah, it's I used to run into that all the time actually when I back when I used to play Marvel Superheroes. See, I've never been much of a power gamer. Um, yeah, Doom Driver. I mean, that's my game of choice. Is the old face rip system. It's not balanced by any stretch of the imagination. You can still end up with, you know, one character in the party being Thor and the other character being Captain America. You know, it can still happen. Um, there are ways to tweak it, and a good GM can balance things out a bit. Um, but because the way that the most of the game systems work, there's no consistent power balance between all of the characters. And honestly, I'm not even sure that there should be, because I mean, if you look at the source material again, you have if you look like a team like the Avengers, you have the Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, and then you have Black Widow and Hawkeye. You know, it's if you're talking about like the modern MCU iteration, for example, but you know, and so Hawkeye and Black Widow, they have abilities and they have skills they bring to the table for sure. But in a straight up fight, they are definitely not anywhere near the equal of a Thor or a Hulk or an Iron Man. You know, even Captain America, the only reason he's so good in the comics and the movies is because he's Captain America. Let's see. More Decepticon jokes. That's it. You guys are fired. Let's see. So I have a system that I've so if you like to back up, formulate my thought real quick. So in FaceRip, you can model characters, which is what we always ended up doing because we just trusted each other. We just were usually too much of a story. We were all story gamers back in the day, so it didn't matter. We would just make characters that we would just make the character we want to make. If you're trying to make characters with like a general table setting with maybe people that you don't play with all the time or people who aren't necessarily super comic people, your choices are a very limited system for modeling the characters in the rules or the random rules. There was a point buy system that was published in Polyhedron magazine, which you can actually get on the Marvel Superheroes Forever website. But if you use it, but usually it came down to the random roll one. The problem with the random roll, whether you're using Heroes Unlimited or the Ultimate Powers book, excuse me, or see you later, Grumpy. If you're using whether you're using the Ultimate Powers book or just the Judge's book for the box set, or the Player's book, excuse me, you end up with weird kooky combinations of powers, and that's because of the random nature the rolling dice to see where your powers are. So there's a cool way to fix that we always did, and that was once a player had rolled their powers out, and I know Bear has something similar to this in Heroic, because I think this is a pretty common solution people had back in the day. Mine was to basically take a look at all your powers, figure out which ones you wanted to keep, and lock those in. The ones that you got rid of, you could either trade those in for another couple of ranks in one of your powers that you're keeping, so you became more powerful by specializing. Or you could trade them in to make them a power stunt of one of your existing, one of the powers you're keeping. So like if you were one of those players that rolls like, okay, I've got flight and energy control and energy blast, and then I've also got hypnosis and plant control, and you're like, this is dumb. So you shave off plant control and hypnosis, then you can just either like up your flight or up your energy control or up your energy blast, or maybe turn, exchange for like, okay, I now have an energy shield, like I have a force field now because of turn it into a power stunt or something like that. So that's how we kind of always handled it, to keep from having those crazy characters. If somebody wanted to play the crazy character, cool. Or if they could find a way to make it all work, even better. And that can create some really fun and interesting characters to like see how they shoehorn in those abilities. So like the energy control person might say that their energy is solar energy, and so the plant control is actually just limited to growth, but their solar energy powers can create hyper growth in plants. And the hypnosis ability they have is they are able to create a hypnotic pattern with their energy pulses. There, you've got it. You used all your powers. Let's see. No, I mean, if you want to, I'm gonna pitch my Discord. If you want to see some, at least a lot of my deeper, more complex thoughts on running different kinds of super games and the benefits of different types of campaigns, and the benefits of running super games, check out my Discord. It's Elfbait. It's easy to locate on Discord. There will be a link in the videos on my channel. Yay. But I have a lot of departments there. One of the most active ones on there is the superhero role-playing channel on there, because I like to talk a lot about superhero role-playing. So there's a lot of short little essays and stuff there. We also have a miniature section, so if you're also a miniatures gamer, there's a miniatures section there as well. But no, yeah, so Doom Driver, if you haven't checked out my Discord, head on over there. I do like to, I am much more eloquent in the written medium, which is probably why I shouldn't be doing a video. I shouldn't be doing a YouTube channel, and I should really just be pimping a blog somewhere. I used to have a big old blog called Icing Lead People back in the day, and ran that for years. It is mostly focusing on miniature gaming, though. But no, superhero gaming has a lot going for it. It's actually one of the best genres of RPGs if you're trying to run like an open table West Marches style of game. Because heroes coming and going with very little rhyme or reason is still thematically on point for a comic book setting, comic book universes. If you have been a if you've ever looked at comic books for a long period of time, heroes come and go out of the stories. They cross paths all the time. So having an irregular group of players, like you do in a West Marches game, really fits a superhero campaign really well. But also, it also adapts really well too. So let's say you do end up with a very regular core of people. It's easy enough to have your big team series and maybe a couple of just solo games, or that's the other thing about superhero games, they run really well with solos because the system itself is usually set up well enough to handle a solo character. A solo character also has enough power, but the conventions of the genre are very much geared towards solo characters, and so you don't run into that disjoint you can sometimes feel when you're playing with too few players in an RPG, where it works, but it doesn't feel right because for whatever reason, the conventions of the genre don't, they need more people. It works the other way around. You can play some genres where you feel like you have far too many people. You're never really going to run into that in a superhero setting. Too many, too few, it's never a big deal. Call of Cthulhu is a good example of one that often feels a little out of whack when you have too many people playing in the game at the same time. Big groups of investigators do not promote the kinds of vulnerability and isolation and just general horror that you should have in the game. So 4 people is about as many as I ever want to have at a table in a Call of Cthulhu game. Anything more, and you're just getting far too many folks. And investigations can go by really quick when you have too many people to be able to split your resources. But superhero games are very seldom going to run into problems with who's there at any given time. Sure, if you're getting into deeper story cuts, that's true of any RPG, and you just kind of have to roll with it. So about 15 minutes more or so before I wanted to head out. I still do have to get to bed and go to work tomorrow, so that's a thing. Any other questions? Anything else I can help with? I'm always so much better as a reactionary speaker than a speaker, because I have thoughts and I have ideas, but I just don't. I don't feel like I have a lot to say. Yeah, I mean, if you have a local game store where you can run an open table, awesome. I have one of the biggest problems I've had around here interfacing with the local gaming community is there are good game stores here, but they're very much event driven. And by event driven, I don't mean tournaments. Like, they have nights for specific things. Monday is Star Wars Day. And so, like, on Monday at the local shop, literally they have an entire day of Star Wars where it's Star Wars miniature games, Star Wars RPG. Cool. In fact, I guess at the heyday of this, not only did they do the entire day of Star Wars games in the store, but after the store closed, the Star Wars players, a select group of them, would go to like the local pizza joint and continue, like, they had a LARP game going for Star Wars. So really cool. So that store's got different nights. You got a Magic and a D&D night, and you even have a historical miniatures night. But it also doesn't, it's not very conducive to just going and picking up a game and running a game. They seem open to it, but at the same time, I've been in there on their game nights, and there's not a lot of room. Steve Jackson games. The only Steve Jackson games I have ever played. I've played Toon. I have played Ogre on the board game / miniatures game side of things. Let's see what else Steve Jackson was. I played some of the Steve Jackson. Well, no, those would be the Ogre game. Yeah, the micro games. So no, I'm not a fan of GURPS. Never got into GURPS. I really do appreciate the level of detail and the information that you can get from GURPS source books. So I always try to, for the longest time, if I could ever find a good deal on one, I would pick them up, especially like their historical source books or their mythology source books. One of the things that really struck me as cool is I remember I picked up their Greek mythology campaign source book, their book for running Greek mythology games. And first of all, it had a lot of cool, just encyclopedic quick reference information for the Greek myths. But one of the things I thought was really cool in it was in the back, there was a section on how to run myth as history. And I found that really fascinating as somebody who's a fan of history and likes to see kind of like the blending of the two. It's fun to read about all these ideas of how to interpret different things from myth as historical. And that was really cool. Illuminati was just too silly for me. I've never been players where I'm not super serious, like I'm not out there, claiming high drama or anything, but I have a hard time with blatant silliness for silliness sake when I'm playing games, which is funny because considering I played Toon, but Toon was different. It was cartoons. But yeah, I have a hard time. Like I never got into Paranoia. I'm not a huge fan of role playing games, at least where you're screwing with the other players. So that was always something that was one thing I really never got into. Probably too much trauma from back in the AD&D days where people would fuck with the party and steal stuff from party members and stuff because I'm a thief. It's what I do. Let's see. Any other questions? Doom Driver, Robert Phillips. You have had some good ones. Let's see. Trying to think if there's any other cool RPGs. Oh, the ElfQuest RPG. I've always been a fan of the ElfQuest comics, and the RPG was pretty cool. But that's basically just basic fantasy from Chaosium. It's used their same system. The BRP system, basic roleplay. Other than that, Star Wars D6. I'm a huge fan of Star Wars D6, the old West End rules for that. Don't have a lot of books for it anymore. Those are more casualties of leaving the roommate days. Right now, the only Star Wars books I have plenty of PDFs, but the Star Wars books I have are the anniversary editions that came out not too long ago for the D6. That is true, but I have yet to run into that's what my character would do player who is ever willing to actually live up to that and deal with the consequences. They almost always turn into sniveling idiots as soon as the consequences come back. Robert Phillips, ElfQuest has hit location if you want to use it. It is the BRP system, so you can play it simpler without hit locations if you don't want to. And don't want to complicate it that way. No, but the consequences thing, yeah, I mean, sure, it is great. I mean, I remember when I was playing my Cavalier, going through the Temple of Elemental Evil, and we had a couple of psionic thieves in the party, and they decided to steal my Cavalier's sword, and they got really pissed off at me when I decided to kill their thief because we were playing a very underpowered party, and my Cavalier, I keep wanting to say Paladin, my Cavalier was was way over leveled for the rest of the party and accounted for, I think, probably 50% of the levels in the party. And so when they decided to screw with my character and try and steal his sword, which to a cavalier is an important thing, I killed them. So, and had no problem doing it because I had about 10 levels on them. But so no, yeah, I killed them. All of them, the women, the children. But ElfQuest is cool. ElfQuest is one of those games that presents very much a different palette, I guess you could call it, when it comes to writing adventures. When you're writing D&D adventures, you're considering encounters and fights, puzzles, and things like that. Whereas ElfQuest, if you're being loyal to the source material or attempting to, is much more about the role playing. It's very much about the interaction between people and characters. There is combat in it, but the combat is usually part of the story and less important than everything else that's going on. I guess it's in a lot of ways it's kind of like Call of Cthulhu when you're writing adventures for Call of Cthulhu, and I'm a homebrew GM, so almost everything I run is something I've written. Call of Cthulhu is about writing up situations that are seldom going to be fixed through combat. In fact, the general statement for Call of Cthulhu is if you're fighting, you kind of screwed up. Because most fights in Call of Cthulhu are not survivable because it has a very realistic damage system and an unforgiving damage system. One of my favorite games that I've ever run, because it was so different, was a game called Tales from the Wood, and I've talked about it a couple of times, in which you were playing non-anthropomorphic animals. You were playing regular woodland creatures going on adventures, trying to deal with things kind of in the vein of Watership Down or the Animals of Farthing Wood, or any of those old Disney movies back in the day, whether it be the live action ones with the animal, oh, there's that old bear again, kind of thing. You're going through and doing stuff as animals. There's obviously some concessions to make it role playable, like the animals can communicate with each other, and there's a weird cosmology. But other than that, you don't have hands. You can't talk to people except for other animals. You're the size of an animal, and the combat rules in that game system are really, really straightforward. They're like, if you get in a fight, most animals will fight until one is injured or one backs down. And they talk about that. In the game, if you get hit by a gun, because there are people in the game, you are dead. That's basically what it says. If you get hit by a gun as an animal, you are dead. If you wanted to play with dinosaurs, sure. But no, that game, writing adventures for that game was very interesting because it really put me into a headspace where I had to think of things from the perspective, I should say, of an animal. Like the first adventure I ran was for my family. My kids started role-playing really young. My youngest played his first character when he was 3. And he played a frog. And it was Tales from the Wood. He was so hyped that he could play a frog. And then in that game, the adventure was... It's kind of more of the style of cozy gaming. You hear the term thrown around a lot nowadays with everybody trying to simulate like the Studio Ghibli stuff and everything. The idea where the solutions are less about fighting your way through problems and finding ways to just solve the problem, And so in this adventure, for example, it was, the animals got word that there was a weird log stuck in the stream. And they went there and they saw that the log was actually a toy boat. And the adventure was literally like, what do you do about the toy boat? It was just the experience of getting there and interacting with this. And then there was some conflict because when they got there, the thing in my games of Tales from the Wood, TFTW, rats were usually the bad guys. And so when they got there, there was a group of rats who thought that the strange log was theirs. They wanted to stake the claim. And they knew what it was, sort of, because the whole concept in the game is the rats are touched by the bane, and the bane is the kind of the stink of man and the corruption of nature. And so the rats knew what it was. And then I ran another adventure at one point, or wrote another adventure, never got a chance to run it, where there was a ghost killing animals, or had killed an animal, but it had been seen in the trees. And the meta reality is that it was just a stray plastic shopping bag that had been floating around in the branches of the trees and seen at night. And where I lived in Washington at the time, we had Safeway grocery store. Some of you probably are familiar with Safeway if you're on the West Coast. But the Safeway had a big red round S in the middle of their white plastic bags. And so in the game, they would see this plastic bag in the air, caught in the trees, with the moonlight shining through it, with the red Safeway S behind it, and it looked like a big glowing eye. Anyways, they were convinced that this ghost was stalking and killing animals because one of the animals had got caught up in the plastic bag and suffocated. And so that was the adventure there. I even had to actually come up with a campaign where the local spazzy rabbit NPC had been by the road and had seen one of the delivery trucks for one of the local pubs go by, and the particular brand of the beer was its mascot was this giant rabbit. So this spazzy rabbit NPC was convinced that there was a rabbit god out there that he had to go find. And so the whole campaign was going to be going out of the wood and across the countryside and on this grand adventure to find this rabbit god, which never had to run that one too. But the whole point of that all was writing these adventures was really fun and challenging because it was coming up with this idea of the perspective of the animals in the setting and how they interacted with the world, how they perceived the world. Another adventure written where the animals would find out that not all humans are bad, but they were going to get scared because they're going to run into this veterinarian who had moved into a cottage in the area. And initially they were going to be terrified because they would have spied his biological samples in his racks. And so, the preserved jars of the animals, and oh my God, he's horrible. Only to find out, of course, that he's a nice guy who helped animals, and he would become a resource for the campaign. So that was a fun one. That one is hard to find anymore because Simon Washburn, the guy who wrote it, doesn't really have any interest in continuing it anymore. So he pulled it off of his drive-through. It was free, but he pulled it off his drive-through. He did give me the source docs for it once. I actually asked him, I'm like, hey, I know you kind of abandoned this game, and he and I had talked about doing an expansion for it at one point that never went anywhere. And I asked him, I'm like, do you have the Word doc for this in case I wanted to do anything with it? He gave it to me. So technically I have the rules. I've kind of always dreamed about cleaning it up and modernizing it, and re-releasing it for free because it was one of his earliest games. It was done very bare bones. But one cool thing, actually, speaking of Bunnies and Burrows, but one of the cool things about Tales from Wood is it actually had a system in there for building animals that weren't already in the game. And this was really useful because the game is written by an Englishman and it's written with the concept of the English countryside as its setting. And so if you wanted to play it in different parts of the world, not all your local animals would be represented in the book. For example, the book did not have raccoons because it is not written where there are raccoons. And so, meanwhile, if you're playing in the States, you're going to have raccoons and you're going to have possums, raccoons and possums. You're going to have those around. And so, the ability to write different animals is cool. Wibs, I believe that's Brian. I don't know if it's coming soon. I just read their update today, and they're just getting ready to release a preview PDF, the preview PDFs, but the physical book seems like it's taking a while. I think they got hung up by the issues with international trade, like so many other people did. Because a lot of the books that were able to be affordable through Kickstarters were being produced in China. So, you have a raccoon phobia? I love raccoons. I was thrilled Jen won't let me. I live in one of the few states in the country that'll let you actually have a raccoon for a pet legally. The only thing is you can't take a wild raccoon. It has to be raised in captivity. A raccoon that was like I can have a raccoon, I just can't have a wild raccoon. But if I found a baby raccoon and I adopted it, it's not technically wild anymore, right? Oh no, the game's not raccoon phobic. You can make a raccoon. It's just written with an English animal set. Badgers that aren't psychos like North American badgers are. Wizard of Oz. Yeah, that is so Wizard of Oz is one of those things I think that hit the public domain. And so, of course, we're getting to see stuff crop up about that as well. Like there's a miniatures game out that's a war game set in Oz. You had a raccoon come into the house begging for food while the Brit was there, though, and that must have been amazing. How did he react? Because I have to laugh because I remember, I had a supervisor at work who was from Birmingham in England, and when we all did the meet and greet when we came to his team, he's like, "I'm from Birmingham, England. Just to let you know, the most dangerous animal that we have in England is a bee. It's like, we have bees. You're probably more likely to get injured by farm animals in England because they don't have anything dangerous there." Yeah, I'm sure he thought it was cute and adorable, and it's kind of funny because my experience with the few times I've encountered North American wildlife with Western Europeans around is that they're not used to having a lot of wild around anymore because unfortunately the area of the country's been populated so long and hunted so heavily for centuries that there's not a lot of wild left in huge parts of Europe. I did find out, however, in mainland Europe, like not in the British Isles, but like down in France and Germany, they have a problem with raccoons. American raccoons have gotten loose in Europe and are quite happy to live there. So yeah, you have a growing population of raccoons in mainland Europe. Trash pandas for everyone. Hey, RPG Grandma. Wildlife comment that was funny. It's like I was watching a video from one of the Australian miniatures guys that I watched earlier, and he had dug out a piece of old terrain that he was wanting to refurbish. And absolute Australian problem. So he's an Australian wargamer, and he's like, he makes the comment on his video. It's like, and before I begin, we have to make sure there are no spiders. And so he's like probing around in the nooks and crannies and all the holes of this piece of styrofoam terrain that he had made to make sure that none of the little nooks and crannies had been populated by an errant spider. And of course, he's in Australia where you actually have to worry about the spiders. Hello, Nerds Nerd. Hello. Of course, you come around right as I'm about to leave. No matter when I'm on Nerds Nerd, you show up about when I'm done. It's a conspiracy. But no, I found that amusing. He's like, and before we start, we have to check for spiders. Yeah. It is your curse. I think honestly, I'm just gonna take it personally because clearly. But I'm surprised you made it here at all, considering I haven't been doing videos in forever. And I'm gonna show this again just because Nerds here and miniatures person. But look, it's a purple owlbear with a laser gun. Unfortunately, there's no way to get it to focus because I have a crappy camera. Anyways, purple owlbear with a laser. Yeah, I had a buddy who lived in Arizona for the longest time when he was a kid. He said he used to get up in the morning and go out and plink with his BB gun and plink the scorpions off his wall because one of the walls in the house faced the east, so when the sun rose, he would plink at. They would be on that facing, sunning themselves in the morning. He would plink at them. Yeah, Nerds Nerd. That's a 28 millimeter, actually large because it's a larger than human. From Alternative Armies, they have a small range of 28 millimeter figures they did recently when Stargrave came out. So it's a bunch of like just generic sci-fi ones. This guy's cool though because he's actually based on a miniature that I had sculpted for them back in my 15 millimeter sculpting days. The very first miniatures I ever sculpted and did so for them as a company were a race from my tabletop games called the Uhul, which were my original creative thought process was, what if owlbears were a humanoid species instead of just one-off monsters? So I had like kind of bugbear-sized owl people, and I called them the Uhul. Well, I'd sculpted a bunch of 15 millimeter ones. They're really rough by standard, even by my standards, and I never really got all that adept at physical sculpting. But when Gavin over there contracted with his sculptor to have these sci-fi miniatures done, he as he put it to me, he had to have an Uhul made, and so this is the Space Uhul. And technically, it is the realization of a miniature that I had started doing and never fully realized. So back when I had sculpted the original Uhul, one of the things that when you're sculpting for somebody else, a lot of times part of your pay is, in addition to getting money, you also will get a certain number of copies cast in metal of the miniature you sculpted for them. Even if you're not sculpting for your own company, but you're sculpting for somebody else, it's just it's part of the fun, right? You get call it sort of like to add to your portfolio, right? Because you're not going to get to keep the sculpt that you made, right? You don't get to keep the original green because they contracted the green, so they own the green. So you would usually get, anyways, I had got a bunch of metal 15 millimeter fantasy Uhul. And one of the coolest and easiest ways to create new miniatures is to take old miniatures, cut pieces off of them, file them down, grind them down because they're metal, and take new putty and sculpt new versions of it. So I had started sculpting a science fiction version of the Uhul, but it never got finished. And so he made one when he went and did these 28 millimeter ones. But yeah, but I've been painting miniatures, mostly focusing on Wild West figures because I picked back up my plan to build a Wild West town, which will be populated by my friends and family. So basically, all of the personalities in the Wild West town will carry the names of people who want to be represented there. And I will make the miniatures may not necessarily look like them because I'm not going to go that far as to try and come up with lookalike miniatures. But, you know, you can be a person in my town as I get it built. But I've been just painting miniatures to kind of get that going. That's been fun. But every so often I am tempted to continue sculpting again. But the other day I had a horrible thing happen. I looked at a bunch of the miniatures that I had sculpted in the past that had been cast in metal. And I found myself mystified by how I had done that. Like, I could not remember how I sculpted those. And that was both weird and a little disheartening because I have a bunch of unfinished sculpts like that. Here, let me pick them up and I can show you just briefly how many I have at hand in unfinished sculpts in green stuff. Here's just one hand's full. These are all miniatures that have been in this state of unfinished sculpting for about a decade now. Because the last time I ever actually sculpted anything to completion was about a decade ago. And sadly enough, like I said, I was looking at that last big set of miniatures that I had produced, and I could not for the life of me, or not produced, because I produce miniatures that I don't sculpt. I contract with other people. It was kind of saddening because I couldn't remember how I had done. Like, how did I accomplish that? Do I play Boot Hill? No, I do own a copy of 3rd edition Boot Hill, but I do not play Boot Hill. I also have Gut Shot, which is a cool miniatures game, but it is so detailed that I actually question whether or not it's actually all that great of a miniatures game. I could see it being a great miniatures game. I mean, it's written as a miniatures game, but it, like I said, it's so detailed. It would be great for like one-on-one or maybe 2-on-2 shootouts, but anything bigger, it's going to slow down. RPG Grandma, this is not sidetracked. I actually lost pretty much all interest in sculpting. So perhaps there's a lesson here. I used to do a lot of conversions on existing miniatures when for my miniatures games. One day, after doing a set of miniature conversions, I realized that only 25% of the original miniature even existed anymore in terms of details. And I got to be at my butt. I'm like, hey, if I can sculpt this much, maybe I can sculpt like whole miniatures. And sure enough, I tried my hand and I did. Now, confluence, perfect timing. At the same time, I was very much involved in the kind of burgeoning 15 millimeter science fiction miniatures craze that happened a while back. And made a contact at Alternative Armies, Gavin Syme, who is the basically the son of the owner of the company and the creative director there. Had a program called the SHM Miniatures Range. SHM stood for Self-Help Miniatures, and so it was a program by which Alternative Armies could get models that they could sell, and up and coming or just even curious hobbyists could sculpt miniatures, send them to them, and then they would actually cast them. They wouldn't charge you to make molds or anything, but your miniatures would suddenly be out in the world, in the wild, and having fun. And people would be buying them and enjoying them. and it was intoxicating. I sculpted a bunch of them. I created an entire range of spaceport denizens for them in 15 millimeter. Most, but what this was a range of individual one-off figures that were all various kinds of aliens, and most of them were unarmed. They were all designed to be just like civilians. You know, a mob boss with a cane, some alien street musician playing a drum, another alien street musician playing, you know, a flute, a little gaggle of street urchin aliens. I did all of this, and it was really cool. And then I got a little ahead of myself. So it was also about the time that Kickstarter came on the scene. The early days of Kickstarter, where you could come in with just a wing and a prayer and an idea and get people to back it. And so I got some concept art and a sculptor to do a preliminary test sculpt and managed to get an entire range of miniatures kickstarted. Not sculpted by me, mind you, but sculpted by somebody else. So this didn't work out quite that well. Kickstarter was new. I didn't exactly understand how it worked very well, and I ended up about $5,000 out of pocket on that one. But an entire range of miniatures was born for 15 millimeter combat wargaming miniatures for basically velociraptors with laser guns in a very serious, gritty sci-fi version, not like, you know, goofiness. So, anyways, that happened. And I kind of got ahead of myself. I started producing miniatures through contracted sculpts, and at the same time tinkering away with my ability to sculpt myself. And I never really got to a level of proficiency to where I could produce my own ranges of miniatures effectively and efficiently. Some of the technical aspects of sculpting were still really hard for me. Like to this day, I still can't sculpt quadrupeds without bird caging. And that bird caging, if you don't know, bird caging is where the legs on the miniature create a bird cage, which the physical molding process gets hung up on, because it gets the rubber gets locked between the legs in the mold. So I ended up having to rely on contracted sculpting for a good while. So the first range I did was that Kickstarter. I learned a lot of lessons from it. Kickstarter evolved. The second Kickstarter I did was that one was a success. It paid for itself, and I didn't have any problems production-wise or anything like that. So that was cool. And at the same time, I was able to contract out of pocket to have another line started. So here I am. I've got like I've got 3 growing ranges of miniature. I got 2 full ranges. I considered them full. A lot of people complained that there were holes and gaps. I'm like, they didn't understand the project. But and then I kind of when I kindly just threw it in was I was having, first of all, combination of things. ADHD is a bitch. I have a lot of it, and one of the aspects of my ADHD is when I figure out how to do something, I suddenly lose interest in it. So it's in a lot of respects, it's the figuring it out that sustains the dopamine and keeps me going. But once I have that sorted, my interest really tapers off quick. And that's what happened with the actual sculpting part of it. But the other thing that happened was, after a long, long while of people asking for an expansion to, I had really popular, like my most popular alien race I created for my range was this group called this range called the Equine, which were 2 blister packs of models. That's all it was a total of 12 different models, and it was enough to create like a core squad of like a militia style alien warfare force, because the whole idea is they were kind of created as asymmetric, and people have been asking for more and more and more of that for a long time. And so I created, or I finally got around to, I'm trying to find an image for it, so excuse me. But I finally got around to doing an expansion on it. And it was cool because my sculptor that I've been working with for a long time, he agreed to do it kind of on speculation. The whole idea was like, okay, cool. I will sculpt the models to get them going, because it was at the point in Kickstarter, like it is today, where without pretty much a completed project, you're never going to get it done. And so I did this Kickstarter, which had all of these figures in it. These are all 15 millimeter figures. And so he made all the sculpts, and he did a great job doing it all. And I ran the Kickstarter, and the first time I ran it, it failed. But it failed by like 2 backers. So I reevaluated the Kickstarter, restructured it, reran it a second time. Have a good night, mages. I'm going to be heading to bed here soon. I went past my mark of 10 o'clock, but I ran it a second time, and it also failed by the margin of a couple of backers. And because this had been such an asked for and heavily requested thing for me to add to my range, and then to see it fail twice, whatever energy there was left in me for sculpting and creating miniatures was just kind of sucked out the window. Now, that said, with the advent of 3D printing, I have managed to sneak out a couple more additions to one of my other ranges. Oddly enough, that very first range I ever did, the Space Dinosaurs, let me see if I can find a picture of that. The Space Dinos, referred to affectionately by a lot of people as Space Raptors, even though they have a different name. I name all my alien races after my friends. So the Equine are named after my friend Iken, and then the Chewok, which are the Space Raptors, were named after my friend Chuck. So those guys, when I first made them, and I'm trying to find images of those to pull up. When I first made those, I actually was doing 3D. I helped. Part of the project was using 3D printing before it was commonly available. It was still back when it was something that you had to contract for. And so I had a friend who had been tinkering with 3D design, and I had him design a vehicle for me. And we got it prototype printed. And so to put this in perspective, anybody who knows how cheap decent 3D printers are nowadays, I don't have a lot of pictures readily available for these Space Raptors, but I'll pull up one just so you can get a general idea. Anybody who knows anything about 3D printing nowadays and what it costs, the vehicle, the original prototyped vehicle for the Space Raptors, to get it printed was $210 to get the prototype model printed. And that was after I had figured out some cagey ways to cut costs. So back then, part of the cost was the volume of material. And so when I had the vehicle sculpted, or not sculpted, but when I had the vehicle printed, we had it printed hollow with a bottom plate. And the bottom plate was then added to the bottom. It was glued to the bottom of the model before it was put into the molds because it was then cast in resin. But that then cut the costs. And then we did later on did another one. Here's an example of one of the vehicles. You can see here, here's the STL for it. You've got the weapons, the main body. This is hollow. It's got a bottom plate on the bottom that this is for the production. This plate was then glued on by the casters and then made a mold. So anyways, I had a couple of other models laying around that I never did anything with because back in the day, it was just cost prohibitive at $200+ to get a prototype done to have them made. But nowadays, $200 will buy you a whole ass printer. You can print as many as you want. And so I had the STLs still sitting around. And so I sent those off and, sent those to Gavin, and we kind of put those into production as well. So, and that's where I am at right now. Like, I would love to do more models. I have ideas and ideas and ideas. I have so many ideas for miniatures, but I don't have the ability to sculpt it myself. And these days, my budget is nil. So I don't really have it. I don't really have the ability to fund a lot of them anymore. And Kickstarters, again, are bullshit. Because pretty much you have to have an entire finished product to do a Kickstarter. This is the flyer that I had developed with my friend for my Space Dinosaurs. This is one of the rare times where the Space Dinosaur vehicles actually had any appearance of being slightly dinosaur-y. RPG Grandma, I have an entire mecha universe, anime mecha universe, with dozens and dozens of mecha designs in my head that will likely never ever see the light of day because I've even got a game I'm working on, a game system for that. So to put it, I lucked out. My friend who did this design for me for this one that's on the screen, he did this for the cost of getting a few copies of it when it was put into production. To contract somebody to do this would be hundreds of dollars. The sculptor I want to have do my mecha has quoted me a price of $100 a design. It's not bad. Now, mind you, the mecha in mine are not going to be large models. I decided that I wanted to do a mecha game that hadn't been done yet. We've got plenty of Battletech clones out there with giant, boxy American mecha, which is, if you didn't know, is a genre into itself now. American mecha is basically tanks on legs. We've got plenty of that. And then we've got, and those are a certain scale. And then we've got spaceship systems where the mecha are basically just stand-ins for fighter bases. I wanted to make something small, something in between, where the models were not 15 millimeter scale, but they would be about 15 to 20 millimeters tall, because that is a scale in which you can get a lot of detail, but also a lot of table economy. And so that's kind of where I wanted to make my game. It's a game of cinematic anime combat where the game is more about the feel of anime combat with mecha rather than actual like statistical accuracy, realism. Yeah, I mean, problem with ideas is like somebody quoted the other day, ideas are worth nothing. Unfortunately, everybody has ideas, and it's the ability to bring those ideas to the table that really matters. And so, before I go, if I could offer one last lesson, if you have an idea and you're passionate about it, work on it. Even if all you can manage is little bits and pieces, work on it, because eventually one day you may look up and it'll be ready and it'll be done and you'll have a thing. What happened with this mecha game is I have had this mecha game idea with its whole universe and everything conceptualized for almost a decade. I haven't worked on it because it seemed so out of reach. However, had I just chipped away at it, bits and pieces, the entire decade, I would probably be doing the second edition of my game by now. Because even at $100 a model, sure, in the short term, that's a lot of money to try and come up with. I did a calculation, and it would take me to get the models that I want to get done for it. For the starting lineup of the game, it's about $2,400 to $3,000. Because there's that many models. There's about 30 separate designs that I really, to be able to hammer out the three factions in the game. Technically two, but with sub factions. It comes out more through, because one on the bad guy side, there are two distinct styles of mecha, whereas the good guy side has kind of one overlap over. Anyways, had I been where I was going with this, had I been tinkering away with this for the 10 years that I've had this in my head, I would have had the game system nailed down and play tested by now, which I do not. I would have models done, and even if not enough to complete the entire lineup, enough to go to Kickstarter and say, this is what I have, this is what I want to do with it, give me your money, and be able to finish it off. So yes, if you have an idea, chip away at it. Even if it doesn't seem likely, keep chipping away at it, because you never know when you're going to look down at your list of things to do for that project and realize that you're either done or you're close enough to done to where you might be able to get enough people interested in it now to get it to done. I've decided that I'm going to chip away at my game now. And even if I don't get anywhere with it, even if it doesn't get done, I'm going to chip away at it. Because at $100 a design, that means that every year I can get 3 or 4 or 5 designs or more, depending. Just depends on how financially stable we get, my wife and myself. But it's better than nothing. And those few models could start something. And also keep in mind one last idea, last thought on miniature games too. If you have an idea for a miniature game, but always consider trying to find a way to make it work with existing miniatures out there. Because if you can, it'll make it so much easier to get it made. The problem with my mecha game is it absolutely won't work the way I need it to work with any of the existing miniature ranges that are out there. So it needs new miniatures. That's why you see a lot of the independent games and even some of the semi big name games using models that are they're making their games miniatures agnostic and able to use any number of miniatures that are out there. They may make their own dedicated miniatures, but a lot of them start as kind of kit bashy games where you know it's designed for you to take whatever you have or whatever you find, whatever you want to pick up and make your own iteration. Always look to see if you can do it that way. And then if you can't, oh well. But if you can, then especially in the miniatures realm, that's 90% of your job, because so many miniatures games are actually just games to push a range of miniatures. I do need to get going. I need to settle down and chill out a bit before bed. Get to bed because I have to work tomorrow because it sucks. But I appreciate those folks who showed up tonight more than I expected would, considering I've been gone for a while, and it kind of encourages me maybe to come back if I actually have something to say. I know I'm kind of known for role playing, but I do actually like to talk about miniatures a lot because it's a passion of mine. Even though I hate painting miniatures, but I do like playing with miniatures and collecting miniatures, and actually know a fair amount of the old ways of doing miniatures business. But yeah, I will talk at you all later sometime. Have a good night, and thanks for coming by again.